He honere, he korore ki tō tātou kaihanga, ko i te timatanga me tō tinga o ngai mea katoa. Kia Ngāti Whātua, tēnā koutou, kia koutou o raukaua, tēnā koutou otira, kia tātou katoa, tēnā koutou. It's a real privilege for me to speak to you today about something that I'm very passionate about. I'm also very conscious that Fiona and I have got the graveyard shift, so I'll try and keep it as interesting as possible. We've all seen the benefits of great cultures created by great leaders, whether they be family members, friends, teachers, coaches, and so on. And I was talking to someone yesterday about a lot of this, and I said some of this, or a lot of this seems to be common sense, and they said to me, but a lot of sense isn't common. So there are two things I want to cover today. Firstly is my overall journey to date and some of what I call the light bulb moments that I've had. And secondly, to talk about what I think culture is as a result of those light bulb moments. So I'm from Opotiki, a metropolitus of Opotiki, in the Eastern Bay of Plenty, from a family and a community highly reliant on gathering and growing food for our sustenance and employment. I learnt that our well-being relied on nature, and so I grew up understanding the importance of family, community and nature. The photo on your left is my family with some kina on the rocks, and on the right are my brothers and a poor friend digging kumara. Every Easter we're either digging kumara or digging spuds, so that was our Easter. When I grew up there in the 70s, there was a lot of employment. Opotiki was a very prosperous place, a great place to grow up. And I believe Opotiki was typical of rural New Zealand at that time. And I think I was a typical teenager. I was unfocused and mischievous. So while a student at Opotiki College, my context was that my attitude and my low grades were such that when I asked my science teacher in the fourth form, "Sir, should I take science next year?" he said, "No, Vaughan." I was from fifth form with my mates drinking in the local pubs, and a year later often turning up to class under the influence. Like my mates, I wanted to leave school at 15, but unlike my older brothers, my parents wouldn't let me, and I certainly didn't know anyone who had attended university, whether that's my immediate extended family or otherwise. And sixth form was a big year. I achieved university entrance, captain of the first 15, and I became a dad that year. So overall, it's fair to say I was unfocused, I was easily distracted, and I was quite mischievous. I had to change, and I wanted to change. And suddenly I had someone looking up to me. To change, I had to grow as a person. To grow as a person, I had to get out of my comfort zone to challenge myself. And if you're wondering, third from the left in the front row. This photo on the left is my wife and I in our younger years when we first started going out together, and I thought I would put her through the test of taking her pig hunting, and you can see that she passed the test. Upon leaving school, my heart was set on being a land surveyor. I loved the outdoors, I loved drawing, and I thought, gee, here's a career where you get paid to be outdoors and you get paid to draw. That was pretty awesome. In my final year of study, I worked all summer at the then Tasman Pulp and Paper Mill in another Eastern Bay of Plenty town called Kawerau. So working there all summer, and one day I went behind the back of the mill, and what I saw changed my future. What I saw were a series of effluent treatment ponds, and When I looked at the discharge point from the treatment ponds into the adjacent Tarawera River, what I saw was above the discharge point, the river was a beautiful, clean green, and below the discharge point, all the way to the ocean, the river was black. And I was really shocked by what I saw. I'd never seen water pollution before. And that experience changed the way that I saw the world. I saw our past as the beautiful, clean river upstream, and I saw our future as a dirty, black river downstream. And at that moment, I decided I needed to find a career where I could make a difference to that picture of our future. So after studying for 5 years to be a land surveyor, and I should have only been 4 years, I decided to study to be a planner because I thought that was a career where perhaps I could help change that future for our country. So fast forward from the late 1980s to the early 2000s, I had worked in various environmental planning roles in Auckland and in Tauranga. My wife Jane and I had a young family. We wanted them to grow up in Opotiki, to experience some of those community, those rural values that I had experienced, to enjoy nature like myself growing up, but without being so mischievous. However, Opotiki wasn't the same place when I grew up there. It didn't have the same economic prosperity, like a lot of rural New Zealand. It was suffering from the impacts of New Zealand's 1980s economic reforms. So the dairy factory, the shoe factory, the clothing factories, the post office had all closed. So Opotiki, while it still had the strong community spirit, the beautiful environment, it lacked that sense of hope that comes from knowing that you've got a strong future. And I realised then that it's one thing having a beautiful environment, lots of beautiful rivers, 80% of the area in native vegetation, beautiful beaches, expansive ocean, but people still need jobs. And I realised then, therefore, I needed to look at the bigger picture. And so my focus then changed to one of sustainability, to look at improving three outcomes: our environment, our communities, and our economy. And I still firmly believe that, recognising that there's a hierarchy, that a strong economy relies on vibrant communities who in turn rely on a healthy environment. After a decade in Opotiki, we moved to Hamilton, where Jane's family are from. Her mum had passed away, her dad was on his own, and we wanted to provide more education opportunities for our family. And that's when I learnt about complexity. But before I go there, can I ask who in the room pays rates to a local council? Keep your hand up if you know what you get for your rates. Okay, there's not a lot of hands still up. So local government's role is providing for the needs of our communities, now and into the future. A challenging but inspirational purpose. But we can't take a siloed approach to addressing issues. We need to recognise the interconnectedness between issues. And if I can take a single issue like improving the water quality of the Waikato River. Firstly, the Waikato River is an ancestor to local iwi. Secondly, the Waikato River is a subject of treaty settlement arrangements between local iwi and the Crown, requiring restoration of the river and co-governance decision-making. Thirdly, the river provides drinking water to nearly half of New Zealand's population, including our largest city, Auckland. And fourthly, the river supports nationally significant sectors. If you think about all the hydroelectricity schemes, 8 of them on the river, agriculture, horticulture, forestry, and so on. And I might be biased, but I think that the Waikato River is New Zealand's most significant river. Taking the primary sector alone, agriculture, $1 billion of value add from the Waikato River catchment alone per annum. So improving water quality involves not just resolving the various technical issues, but it's how do you manage all of those competing interests in the same catchment. And so we would call this a wicked or a complex issue. And the traditional approach of a council when they're wanting to improve water quality is to write a plan, take a draft plan out to the community, get a bit of feedback and carry on with that plan. But we know that water quality, more than any other issue, requires actual change on the ground, and therefore the importance of landowners buying into that change. So we decided to do something different with the support of our river iwi to, in effect, ask the community to write the plan on how they would improve water quality. So we formed what we call a collaborative stakeholder group, 24 people representing all interests of the community. We supported them with a independent technical leadership group, so the best information available. And over 2.5 years, an average of 600 hours per member, they came up with a plan to improve water quality. This required a big shift in mindsets from councillors, from staff and stakeholders, a totally different way of working, a shift in culture, a different type of leadership. Was that approach successful? The plan was fully endorsed by all of the river iwi for public notification, and without asking, we got a letter of support from the Waikato Dairy Leaders Group to support the plan. Two very different interests supporting the same plan. I believe a successful outcome and a demonstration of the benefits of different leadership. Getting on to my last light bulb moment. When I became Council CE nearly 6 years ago, I did the normal thing expected of a CE. I reviewed whether or not we were fit for purpose. I reviewed our structure to align with our purpose and our strategic direction. I then set about improving how we worked as an organisation. I sought to spend as much time with staff as possible, seeking to lift engagement. We reviewed our rewards and recognition system. For the first time in 20 years, we brought the whole organisation together to celebrate our successes. So we came to our regular staff survey, and I found that engagement had just flatlined. And so I was pretty gutted with that result. And so I had 3 learnings from that exercise. Firstly, what we were measuring engagement is a symptom of culture, and it's the latter that we need to focus on. Secondly, I overestimated my impact as a CE. I can certainly set the tone for the organisation, but as we know, culture is the day-to-day experience and interactions that staff have, and therefore I needed to build a team to improve our culture. And thirdly, we needed a rigorous, not an ad hoc approach to building leadership and culture. And that's where our relationship with Human and Synergistics was born, even though Neil vowed he would never work for a government organisation. The slide shows different levels of our organisation, and you can see that we're making good progress to building blue. I think on your left is the executive leadership team. One of them said to me, Vaughan, that just shows that we're delusional. But if you go back to Sean's point, what are we measuring here? We're measuring or answering the question, how are we expected to behave? And if ELT wasn't blue, because they know what the expectations are around a behaviour, then I would be really concerned. And so just moving on to what culture means to me. And I believe that the following statements apply to us equally as individuals and organisations. We all have a history. It makes us who we are, the people that have influenced us, the events that have shaped us, what's an acknowledgement that some are good and some are not so good. But what's important is that we continually reflect and learn as organisations and individuals to make ourselves the best that we can be. So continually reflecting, learning, changing to stay relevant, to me, are essential parts of any culture. The photo is of Dame Ngāneko Manhinik. Dame Ngāneko passed away a few years ago. Dame Ngāneko was from Ngāti Tata, Waiuku, on the southern shores of the Manukau Harbour. In the 1980s, Dame Ngāneko and her iwi were frustrated by the New Zealand laws and decisions of the time that continued to ignore Māori values towards nature, towards the environment, leading to widespread environmental degradation and cultural degradation, including the bulldozing of burial sites, discharging of raw sewage into our rivers and harbours. She worked with a young Pākehā woman lawyer, and they used every legal avenue possible to have Māori values in the Treaty of Waitangi formally recognised. In those days, as you can imagine, it was in the 1980s, a white male-dominated world, so having two young women advocating for Māori spiritual values towards water, the Treaty of Waitangi, they were certainly up against it. In 1987, they won a landmark case against the Waikato Valley Authority, a predecessor of my organisation, and stopped the discharge of dairy effluent into a tributary of the Waikato River. The Pākehā lawyer was Dame Shana Elias, recently retired Chief Justice of our Supreme Court. And it's people like Dame Ngāneko that our attitudes to water have fundamentally changed. Concerns about water are now mainstream. The consideration of Māori spiritual values in water are now mainstream. Our past influences our future. During our careers, we focus a lot on building our skill sets. Our organisations invest a lot on technology to give us the best tools to do our jobs. But it's our mindsets that are the most important and that we spend the least or put the least effort into developing. Research has shown that mindsets play a pivotal role in determining achievement and success. If I go back to the Tarawera example, my mindfulness and awareness motivated me to take action to what I'd seen and that others obviously hadn't seen. How we think is important. There is good reason why Māori regard the head as the most sacred part of our bodies. Personally, and perhaps in my efforts to be less mischievous, I've become a little bit too serious. And that highlights that sometimes our strengths can become our weaknesses and vice versa, and it's a continuous balancing act. So I've had to learn how not to sweat the small stuff at home and at work. And this is really important for our own well-being and to help build a trust environment. And having fun's also critical. As an organisation, we spend a lot of time having fun events throughout the year, even if that's at my own expense. Like an individual species of an ecosystem, each member of an organisation's ecosystems is subject to the fate of the ecosystem as a whole, the network as a whole, irrespective of that individual's apparent strengths. I believe that my job is no more important than any other job in the organisation. We just have different responsibilities. I often say to staff that my success relies on their success, that I can't do my job unless they can do their job. So all parts of our ecosystem, our staff, our contractors, all need to flourish and grow. A role of a leader is to grow more leaders. When I restructured our organisation, 4 of my direct reports chose redundancy. Collectively, they had worked for Waikato Regional Council for over 110 years. And while such loyalty is great, it also means that sometimes it's not creating the room for others to grow. And I know that those 4 people have gone on to grow from their new experiences. Currently, 1/3 of our vacancies are filled internally, meaning that people are taking more opportunities to have more responsibilities and grow as well. A role of a leader is to grow more leaders, because ultimately no one is around forever. And like any ecosystem, there is a continuous cycle of growth and renewal. No te raudo, nāku te raudo, ka ora ai te iwi. With your food basket and my food basket, we will sustain the people. It's important to walk the talk. In addition to using regulations to improve environmental outcomes, our organisation places equal importance on working with landowners to improve environmental outcomes, using both carrots and sticks. So in the last year alone, for example, we've planted and retired the equivalent of 1,600 rugby fields to improve environmental outcomes, biodiversity, water quality, climate change. 5 years ago, my wife and I were fortunate enough to buy a 10-acre block on the outskirts of Hamilton that included 2 wetlands that previous landowners sought to drain and farm. So far, we've planted 10,000 native trees. So the photo is a before and after photo over that 5-year period for one of those wetlands. Management is like the jacket that you wear. Leadership is like your skin. You can't take it off. Like human synergistics, I firmly believe in the model that leadership strongly influences culture, and culture strongly influences leadership, and that both strongly influence performance. The slide is the same as the OCI for the same team in 2017 and 2019. The main change is the team's leader. If I can now invite the Waikato Regional Council team to the stage. It's still my last slide. I'd like to finish off by talking about water. It's that experience with the Tarawera River in my early 20s that motivated me to make a difference. And after all, our bodies comprise mostly water. 75% of our brains and our hearts are water. So there's a lot of truth in the Māori saying, ko au te awa, ko te awa ko au. I am the river and the river is me. Going back to Dame Ngāneko, it is clear that her leadership has helped to influence a new culture for our country, where we are beginning to put the environment first before looking at our own needs, whether they be social, economic, and so on. That is sustainability. Compare that to how previous generations put their needs before the environment, and we are paying the price for that now. We want a better future for our mokopuna. We are redefining, in my view, what it means to be a New Zealander. And it is that new, evolving culture that I believe is growing new constructive leaders. Kia ora tātou. Kia ora tātou.